"Mum, please don't leave me." The child sobbed through the stormy night, clinging to his unconscious mother in the freezing cold storage, until a millionaire opened the door and froze in shock. Because right there, in that very spot, he too had once begged for his life. Claire Matthews, a woman who once believed that patience could fix anything. She taught part-time art classes, lived simply, and believed in kindness. 3 years as Mark Wallace's wife, 3 years of trying to be soft enough to be accepted, and 3 years of living like an uninvited guest in her own home. But that night, everything she had ever given in kindness and sincerity was crushed by the very people who called her family. Glendale, October. Rain poured outside. The fireplace still crackled in the living room. The scent of lavender hung in the air, and a warm chandelier swayed gently overhead. But in the middle of all that comfort, Claire stood stiff, as if winter had crept in through her bones. She was soaked. Her hands clenched the strap of an old canvas bag. Inside, a few kids' clothes, a half-empty bottle, and the small blanket Ava always clutched in her sleep. Her jacket was thin, no match for the wind seeping in through the cracked front door. On the couch, Darlene Wallace sat like a judge, pristine white sweater, legs crossed, wine glass gently swirling in her hand. Mark stood behind his mother, silent. He didn't look at Claire. His eyes were glued to the financial news on the TV. "You can walk out on your own, or I can call the police," Darlene said calmly, like she was mentioning a slight chance of rain. Claire took a deep breath. "The kids are asleep. Even better, easier to carry." Mark turned slightly at her words, but still didn't meet her eyes. Claire looked at him, voice steady. "Do you really believe I cheated on you?" Silence. Then, without emotion, Mark said, "I'm not sure those kids are even mine." Claire let out a soft laugh. Not bitter, just the kind that comes when you realize something had ended a long time ago. She nodded, no more words. Darlene set a small bag on the table. "A few $100, enough to start over, if you're smart with it." Claire took it. Her hand didn't shake. She walked upstairs, quietly across the wooden floor, careful not to wake the kids. Ava clutched her one-eared teddy bear. Eli lay on his side, one hand still gripping the collar of Claire's sweater like he was still dreaming. She picked them up, wrapped them in blankets, and came back down. Darlene had already opened the front door. Cold air rushed in. No one said a word. Claire looked at Mark one last time. Not with hope, not expecting anything, just the look of someone who once loved deeply, and now knew that love would never protect her again. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the children, and stepped onto the porch. The door closed behind her, softly, but final, like it had sealed off whatever once was called family. Rain struck the back of her neck like ice. Claire took off her coat and wrapped it around the kids. Bare feet touched the cold, slick stone steps. Ava buried her face in her mother's shoulder. Eli was asleep, but his fingers stayed clenched around her collar, as if afraid to let go. She didn't know where she would go, only that she couldn't go back. They won't grow up in a house full of hatred. If I have to lose everything to keep them safe, then I will. At 9:14 p.m., Claire Matthews was thrown out of her home, with 2 children, a torn canvas bag, and the last of her faith in human decency. No one called her name as she left. The wind had changed. Each gust now struck Claire full in the face. She could barely feel her feet anymore. Every dragging step sent a jolt up her spine. She didn't cry. She never really saw the point. Tears wouldn't ease the pain in her legs, and they wouldn't warm the 2 small bodies trembling in her arms. Through the bare trees, an old storage shed appeared, weathered, forgotten. But in that moment, it looked like the only thread of hope she had left to cling to. Claire didn't know how long she had been walking. Her vision blurred from the cold, the exhaustion, the sheer weight of it all. But her heart kept its rhythm, the rhythm of a mother who could not afford to stop. The rotted wooden door gave way under the push of her frozen, purpled hands. Inside, it was dark and damp. The air smelled of stale hay and dirt, like something abandoned by time. She stepped in. Her eyes didn't need to adjust. Outside hadn't been any brighter. In the corner, she laid Ava and Eli onto a thin pile of old straw. The stalks were sticky and rough, clinging to their cheeks and hands. Ava started to whimper from the cold. Claire didn't hush her, not because she didn't care, but because all her throat could manage now was breathing. Ava was the first to react. 3 years old, but her emotions always burned bigger than her age. Her face scrunched, red with cold and fatigue. She buried herself in Claire's chest, lips trembling, trying not to cry, and failing. Each sob broke from her like wind against broken glass. "Mommy, Mommy, I'm cold." She said it while pulling Claire's hand to her chest, gripping it tightly. Claire stroked her daughter's hair, unwrapped her scarf, and with shaking fingers, wrapped it back around Ava's small body. "I know, baby. Mommy's here." Eli was different. He hadn't said a word the entire time. Even after being carried for almost an hour through freezing rain, he remained silent. His eyes were wide, dark, watchful. He didn't cry. He didn't ask questions. He simply looked with eyes that didn't belong to a child, but to someone quietly waiting for something to break. Behind his left ear was a faint birthmark, shaped like a water droplet. Claire used to call it his brave drop, a small blessing in a life full of cracks. Eli had always been introspective. Claire once said he was quiet like a morning lake. But tonight, that quiet scared her. He didn't flinch when she laid him down, didn't complain about the wet clothes clinging to his skin. He just watched her, with a gaze that held more than any child should carry. Claire pulled both of them close, pressing their small bodies to her chest, wrapping around them with every ounce of strength she had left. To her left, Ava trembled, clinging to her like a lifeline. To her right, Eli stayed still. But he wasn't sleeping. He was listening. To his mother's breathing, his sister's soft sobs, the wind scraping against the tin roof. Every sound, he took it in. Claire wasn't sure if she was trying to warm them or trying to stay conscious. Her hand slipped beneath Ava's neck, then across to Eli's back. His spine felt sharper than usual, his body colder than she'd feared. But her hands had no feeling left, only the instinct to hold on. She leaned against the wall. Her eyes began to shut. Ava still hiccuped softly, her voice barely a whisper. "Mommy, don't fall asleep." Claire nodded slowly, offering a smile. A shattered smile, the kind that can't comfort anyone. Not really. "I won't. I'm not sleeping." But she knew. She knew her awareness was slipping away. Her eyelids heavier, her wrists numb, her breath growing shallow. Eli knew it too. He sat up. Not quickly, not afraid. He just looked at her. Then gently he touched her cheek. Her skin was cold. Her arms no longer clung to him like before. Eli stared at her face for a long moment, as if memorizing it, as if he knew something was getting closer. He couldn't call for help. He couldn't turn on a light. But there was one thing, the only thing, he still had left to do. He leaned in, his voice barely audible, just above a breath. "Please don't leave me, Mommy." It wasn't just a whisper. It was the fear of being left behind, wrapped into 4 words. Spoken by a boy, who had never been taught how to beg someone to stay. The shed remained dark. The rain kept hammering the roof. Indifferent. But that night, in that quiet space between desperation and hope, one small heart beat loud enough to shift the fate of all three of them. The first cold night of the season. A black Range Rover rolled slowly down the muddy path toward the old Grayson farm. Its headlights sliced through rows of bare pine trees, revealing a worn main house standing in the center of a wide, open yard. The rain had just stopped. The ground was still soaked. The silence around the valley felt almost like it was holding its breath. At the wheel was Nathaniel Grayson, 45, self-made biotech millionaire. Polished, successful, the kind of man who lived in a New York penthouse and spoke in boardrooms. But once, he was a boy with no name, no parents, no one who ever chose to keep him. The only place he had ever known as home, even briefly, was this farm. A quiet farmer had taken him in after a storm when he was 6. That man died when Nathaniel was 19. Nathaniel left and never looked back. Until now. The SUV stopped in front of the porch. Nathaniel turned off the engine, but didn't move. The cabin light lit his still face. No one knew why a man like him would return here, now, after all these years. Maybe not even Nathaniel himself, only that something inside him needed to return to the place he was once left behind, to face something that had slept too long. He opened the door. Cold air swept in. He pulled his collar up and stepped out. Maggie Jean, the housekeeper, was already waiting. Late 50s, thin but sturdy, eyes sharp and clear. She had cared for the man who once raised Nathaniel and stayed on after his death to watch over the empty land. "Welcome home, Nate," she smiled softly. "Still smells like old hay. Still cold as ever." "I don't remember it ever being warm," Nathaniel replied, his gaze drifting to the back of the yard, to the wooden storage shed, silent in the shadows. She led him inside. The kitchen still held some warmth. The fireplace crackled. A cup of ginger tea waited on the table, something Maggie had always made for him. But Nathaniel didn't sit. He kept staring out the window. "There was a strange noise earlier," Maggie said quietly. "I thought maybe a stray cat, but it sounded like a child crying. Rhythmic. The back shed." Nathaniel didn't answer, but she saw his hand tighten around the mug. His eyes, they had already traveled somewhere far, somewhere old. "Do you want me to check?" "No, I'll go." He slipped his coat back on. His shoes were still wet. The sky hung low, thick with mist. Wind bit at his face as he walked. The shed hadn't changed. Tilted roof, rotting wood, rusted hinges. With every step closer, Nathaniel's heart pounded deeper, not from fear, but because something inside him already knew. This time, someone would be on the other side. His hand closed around the handle, turned. Creak. Nathaniel froze in the doorway. The musty air, the scent of straw, the weight of human presence. Everything hit at once. But what rooted him in place was the scene before him. A woman, thin, collapsed against the wall. 2 children, one fast asleep. The other sitting up, staring directly at him. The boy didn't flinch, didn't seem afraid, didn't look hopeful. Just watched, as if silently asking, "Who are you? And what will you do?" Nathaniel stepped inside. Every step felt like walking through a memory. He had once laid here, on this same cold straw, curled up, shivering, unsure if he would make it through the night. But back then, no one opened the door. Now, he was the one opening it. He knelt down, took off his coat, laid it over the woman and her children. His hands trembled, not from the cold, but from touching a moment he could never change in his own life. Yet maybe, just maybe, he could save someone else from reliving. Claire was breathing, barely, but steady. Ava stirred. Eli remained silent. Nathaniel placed a hand gently on the boy's shoulder. Eli didn't pull away. Between them, one man once never chosen, and one boy who didn't yet know who to trust, was a silence more honest than words. Nathaniel lowered his head, voice rough but steady. "I'm here now. You're safe." No one had ever taught Eli to trust, but he nodded, slightly. Surely. Nathaniel lifted Claire onto his back, picked up Ava in his arms, then looked to Eli. "Can you walk?" Eli nodded. He stepped forward, grabbing the hem of his mother's coat, just like he'd been holding on to all night. Outside, Maggie had the car door open. The cabin light spilled out, catching the pale color of Claire's face. She didn't ask anything, just placed a dry blanket, a warm towel, and a ginger tea packet in a paper bag. The kind gesture of someone who had seen enough suffering to know silence can be the kindest response of all. As the SUV pulled away from the shed, its light cast long shadows across the grass. The shed door stayed ajar. The wind lifted a piece of straw and carried it outside, one final trace left behind. Inside the car, Eli sat still. He turned his head, looked back at the shed one last time. The wind still howled, but it wasn't scary anymore. And Nathaniel, his hand still resting firmly on Claire's shoulder, looked back too. Not at the building, but at the piece of himself he had just returned to. There are doors some people spend their whole lives wishing someone would open for them. And then one day, when they've survived, when they've grown, when they finally understand, they come back, and they open it for someone else. Claire woke to the hazy light of an early winter morning. A wooden ceiling overhead, old but clean. No sirens, no shouting, just the sound of wind against the walls and the faint scent of magnolia carried on the warmth of a fireplace. She shifted. The mattress was soft, her clothes were dry, her body ached all over, but the bone-deep cold from the storm was gone, replaced by something quiet and gentle, a thick blanket draped across her shoulders. And then it hit her. The rain, the shed, Ava crying, Eli whispering. Claire clenched her fists. She sat up with a gasp. "Where are my children?" The door opened. A man stepped inside, tall, steady, in a plain cotton shirt. His voice was deep, calm. "Next room over. Both of them are still sleeping. They're safe." Claire paused, hands gripping the blanket. Her breath slowed, but her eyes stayed fixed on the man, watchful, uncertain. "Where are we?" "Grayson Farm," he said. "After I brought you all in from the shed last night, the town doctor gave the okay to bring you here to recover. The kids weren't running fevers. You, on the other hand, were completely drained. You've been sleeping since 2 a.m. She looked around. The room was small but warm. A reading lamp on the nightstand, a folded towel on a chair. Simple things, but human and safe. She turned back to him. "You're the one who found us." He nodded. "I'm Nathaniel Grayson. I own the farm." Claire gave a small nod, part thank you, part not knowing what else to say. Nathaniel didn't press. He simply watched her with the kind of patience that comes from knowing what it's like to rebuild from broken. No force, no pressure. It took her a long moment. Then she whispered, "I didn't think we were going to make it through that night." Nathaniel sat at the edge of the bed, keeping a respectful distance. "You got your children out of the storm. That's all I need to call you a mother. In every real sense of the word." Claire lowered her head. The tears came fast, unexpected and unhidden, not from fear, but because, for the first time in a long time, she could speak without needing to defend herself. Her voice shook through her breath. They threw me out in the middle of the night, just me, a canvas bag, and 2 sleeping babies in my arms. Nathaniel didn't ask who they were, didn't ask why. Their names are Eli and Ava, she added softly, almost like she needed to hear it aloud to believe they were still hers. They're twins, just turned 3. Eli's the older one, quiet, sensitive, lives more in his head than in words. They're good kids, they really are. And I've always felt guilty for not giving them the kind of childhood they deserve. Nathaniel listened, his eyes shifting, not with curiosity, but with care, as if holding on to every name she gave him. Last night, when I passed out, I heard him whisper, "Mommy, please don't leave me." Claire tightened her hands. "I don't know what brought you back to that shed, Nathaniel. But if it was anything, maybe it was that voice." Nathaniel's reply was soft, but solid. It was real. That voice pulled me out of memories I thought I'd buried for good. Claire looked at him, stunned. He met her gaze. "I was left in that shed when I was 6. Same cold, same silence. No one came." Her eyes widened. "And now you came back?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not to relive it," he said, "to make sure if someone else ever ended up there, they wouldn't go through it alone." In the next room, Eli quietly slipped from under the blanket. 3 years old, soft curls, wide dark eyes. He didn't call out, just pressed his face to the door frame, watching his mother, awake and safe. Claire looked up and caught sight of him. Her smile was instant. "Eli," she called gently, "come here, baby." He hesitated, then took small, cautious steps toward her. He didn't avoid Nathaniel, but kept just enough distance. The careful calculation of a child learning how to measure trust in silence. "Mummy's okay now," Claire whispered as she pulled him into her arms. A soft rustle from the other room. Ava sat up, clutching her frayed corner of blanket. She rubbed her eyes, blinking. "Where's Mommy?" she mumbled sleepily. Claire smiled. "Right here, Ava. Mummy's right here." Little feet padded quickly across the floor. Ava flung herself into her mother's arms, holding on like she'd never let go. Nathaniel stood and took a step back. He knew this moment didn't need words. The door opened once more. An older woman entered, carrying a tray with tea and neatly folded towels. Her face was kind, her eyes sharp. The kind of woman who had been caring for people long before they realized they needed it. "Good morning, Miss Matthews," she said warmly. "I'm Maggie Jean, housekeeper here. Chamomile tea with ginger. Helps the lungs, warms the body." Claire nodded gently. "Thank you, Maggie." "Just Maggie's fine. The little ones are sweet." Ava woke up at dawn and told me this place has no ghosts. I took it as a compliment. Claire laughed. The first time in days of cold, rain and fear. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But here, right now, her children were safe. And they were not alone. And in a world where sometimes all it takes is one person staying, just one, to change everything. Claire knew a new chapter had begun. If you're still reading this far, maybe a piece of this moment has reached a part of you too. Have you ever woken up in a strange room, unsure of what comes next, or found yourself silently wishing someone, just one person, would sit beside you, say nothing, and just not leave? If you have, I'd love to hear your story. Share it with me. 3 days after the storm, the Grayson farm began to fill with life again. Ava played on the living room floor, scribbling on a piece of cardboard. Maggie set a plate of cookies in front of her, then returned to wiping down the kitchen table. Eli didn't speak, but sat nearby, eyes never leaving his mother. Claire was folding laundry with Maggie. Her hands were steadier now, her face still pale, but her eyes had cleared, no longer dull like they were that first morning. Maggie glanced at the children and spoke softly. "Little Ava's easy to love. And Eli. Quiet kid. But look close. He's a lot like the boss when he was young. Didn't say much, but had a mind full of stories." Claire let out a soft laugh. "I think Eli carries the weight of someone who's survived more than he should have." Maggie paused. That's exactly how Nathaniel survived too. When he first came here, he didn't speak for 3 months, just sat by the window watching. But his eyes, always watching, always deep. Claire nodded and went quiet for a few seconds. Then, carefully, "I don't know where we're going next. I just know I can't keep dragging my kids from place to place. If it's possible, I'd like to stay a little longer. I'll help in the kitchen, do laundry, anything. I don't expect it for free." Maggie smiled as she continued folding towels. "You'll have to talk to Mr. Nathaniel, but I'll tell you one thing. This house hasn't felt this peaceful in years, not since you and the kids arrived." That night, after the children had gone to bed, Claire stepped softly into the living room. The fireplace still glowed. Nathaniel sat nearby, holding a leather-bound journal. A mug of tea steamed beside him. "You're still up?" Claire asked. He didn't turn. "I am. Something on your mind?" She sat across from him, back straight. The firelight cast soft shadows on her tired face. "I never said thank you," she began. "I want to thank you. For everything. Not just for letting us stay, but for not questioning us. Even when we showed up out of nowhere." Nathaniel nodded, still not looking directly at her. "I used to hate being questioned, so I don't ask questions now." "We don't have anywhere else to go," Claire continued. "If it's okay, I'd like to stay for a while. I'll help however I can. I'm not skilled at anything special, but I won't let anyone feed my children for free." Nathaniel looked at her for a long moment, not judging, just still. "This house used to be cold," he said, "not because of winter, but because it was missing people who truly lived." He set the journal aside. "You and the kids can stay, as long as you need." Claire smiled, softly, shyly, but sincerely. One evening, after dinner, Nathaniel was sitting on the floor with Ava and Eli. Claire watched, quietly overwhelmed by the sight of her children, smiling. Not just smiling, but happy in a way she hadn't seen in years. Even Maggie noticed. She leaned toward Claire and said gently, "It's been a long, long time since this house, or that man, felt this warm." Claire looked at them, Nathaniel laughing as Ava held up a crayon like a trophy, and for the first time she let herself think, if only their real father had ever treated them this way. Maggie noticed the look in her eyes. She placed a hand over Claire's. "Go to them. Your heart needs healing, Claire. You deserve every good thing this world still has to offer." Claire looked at her, eyes glassy. Her heart swelled with gratitude and grief. After tidying the kitchen, Maggie left, quietly, leaving the space for just the 4 of them. Claire approached the living room, wiping away the tear that had escaped, one filled with both pain and peace. She sat down beside the children, watched them play, then turned to Nathaniel, not out of weakness, not out of brokenness, but with a voice steady, like peeling back layers of a wound too long buried. She told him about Mark, the man who was charming while courting her and hollow after marrying her. About her mother-in-law, who always treated her like an ungrateful burden. About the nights she slept in the hallway, clutching her babies while Mark passed out drunk. And finally, about the night they threw her out, when all she had time to grab was a bag, a bottle of milk, and Ava's tattered blanket. Nathaniel said nothing, just listened. And in Claire's posture, in the way she gripped her hands while recounting how she had to choose between her life and her children's safety, Nathaniel saw something familiar. The way her fingers curled looked just like that little boy he once was, watching through the slats of the old shed wall, seeing a girl with tangled hair hold tightly to her mother's dress. He didn't know for sure, but his heart did. Something had shifted. The next morning, light rain tapped against the windows. Nathaniel called his attorney. "I need everything you can find on Mark Wallace and Darlene Wallace. Dig deep, especially anything they've buried." A few days later, a thick folder arrived. Brown cover, smelling of old paper and early winter air. Nathaniel didn't open it right away. He left it on the old wooden table in the quiet room, where only the ticking of the clock could be heard. He poured himself a cup of coffee, then began flipping through the pages. Page 1, Mark Wallace, accused of domestic violence in 2016. Case closed quickly. Signs of private settlement. No criminal charges. Page 2, denial of maternity benefits. Claire Matthews listed. Signature didn't match hospital records. Signed by Darlene Wallace. Page 3, medical report. Claire admitted for falling downstairs, fractured rib, shoulder contusion, no investigation, no follow-up. Nathaniel set the page down. He sat in silence. The house was quiet. Far off, he heard Ava laughing. He turned. Claire was in the kitchen making tea. The soft morning light touched her hair. Ava sat on the counter, laughing as a cookie slipped from her hand and crumbled on the floor. He watched them for a long moment and remembered that shed long ago. Him, 6 years old, peeking through the cracks, seeing a girl smile like Ava just did. But back then, he couldn't step outside. This time, he would not leave anyone behind that door. Claire walked into the room and saw the open folder. Nathaniel didn't speak. He simply slid it toward her. She didn't touch it right away, just read the first line. It was enough. She understood. Someone had pulled the past out of the dark. She sat, turned each page, in silence. Each sentence felt like a stitch. Not painful, but pulling closed a wound that had been left open for 3 years. Her hand trembled, but her eyes stayed clear. At last, she looked up. Her voice was steady, firm. "I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing it because I thought I was the only one who ever went through it." She looked toward the kitchen. Ava was still laughing. "I can't let the next time be another mother who doesn't survive." Nathaniel looked at her, longer than usual, then nodded. "I'll take care of my part. You just keep living. Raise your kids. That's the hard part." Claire smiled, not politely, not out of habit, but because, for the first time in years, she knew someone was standing behind her. Some people only want back what they once threw away, not out of love, but because they can't stand losing control. Mark was one of those people. For the past 3 weeks, he had lived in what he proudly called freedom. No crying kids, no nagging, no Claire Matthews. But that illusion cracked the moment his mother, Darlene, handed him a brief note from someone at her church. Someone saw Claire with the kids near the Grayson Medical Clinic, close to Nathaniel Grayson's farm. Mark froze. "Grayson? Who?" "Nathaniel Grayson," Darlene replied. "The guy who was on the cover of that magazine. Regenerative farming. Now some millionaire farmer." Mark said nothing. But that night, he quietly made a call to a private investigator a friend had once recommended. "Find my ex-wife, Claire Matthews, likely in Grayson County, with twin kids. What exactly do you want to know? The man she's living with." 3 days later, the report arrived. A photo, Claire holding Ava in the yard, Eli near the garden, seated beside a tall man sharpening a plough under the porch. The image was grainy, but clear enough to tighten Mark's throat. Attached was a background file on Nathaniel Grayson. Mark stared at the dossier, squinting, cigarette burning between his fingers. Then he smirked. She sure knows how to latch on to someone. He got in his SUV and drove straight to Grayson. At the Grayson farm, the air was still. Early winter wind moved through the pine trees, making the bare branches sway. The sun hid behind a thin veil of clouds, casting silver light over the hills. Ava sat on the porch, lining up small acorns in neat rows. Eli was beside her, carving a wooden spoon for Maggie, his hands careful and focused. Claire watched through the window, drying the last dish. No makeup, no tension in her shoulders. For the first time in years, she allowed herself a slow morning. Then, the sound of tires. Not loud, but loud enough to stop the stillness. Eli looked up first, his hand freezing mid-cut. Ava followed, then turned toward their mother. Claire didn't move, only for half a second, then set the glass down, quickly wiping her hands on her apron. The gate wasn't locked. A black SUV pulled in, tires leaving thick tracks in the wet red clay. Mark stepped out. White dress shirt, collar buttoned high, hair slicked back. One hand held a box of cookies, the other a child's gift box. His eyes scanned the yard like he was sizing up a property he used to own. "Claire," he said, his voice low, warm, but thick, like smoke that clings to everything it touches. Claire stepped out. Her legs stiffened for a split second, then softened enough to carry her forward. The kids followed, instinctively, Eli pulling Ava behind him. "You look well," Mark said, half smiling. "Not quite the last image I had of you." Claire stood in front of the doorway, unmoving. "Why are you here?" "To see my kids." "Since when did you remember they're yours?" "I get that you're mad, but that doesn't mean you can keep them from me. I'm their father. The law still says that counts." A quiet creak from the house. Nathaniel stepped outside. He stood at Claire's right, calm, steady. He placed one hand gently on her shoulder. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to still the wind. "I'm Nathaniel Grayson. I own this land. If you have business, talk through a lawyer." Mark rolled his eyes and smirked. "So this is what we're doing now? Found yourself a sugar daddy, huh, Claire?" Claire didn't respond, not because she was afraid, but because he no longer deserved a single word from her. "You threw me and our children out in the middle of a storm, called me a whore, smashed your daughter's milk bottle on the floor, and now you show up with cookies and think that makes you a father. I said I was sorry, and you can't keep them from me forever." From inside the house, the sound of Ava crying. Eli appeared at the door. His small hand gripped the wooden frame. "Don't let him inside, Mommy." His voice was quiet, but every syllable cut through the air like a blade. Mark turned toward him, forcing a smile. "Eli, it's Dad. I just came to visit." Eli said nothing. He only stepped back, pulling Ava closer to him. Claire stepped forward. "You don't get to come in, and you don't get to call them yours. You didn't raise them. You didn't protect them. You never even asked if they were still alive. So what are you to them, really?" Mark's face flushed red. "I'll sue you. I'll fight for custody." Nathaniel stepped forward, blocking the door. "Great. Then we'll talk in court. But don't show up here again unless you're holding a subpoena. If you take one more step on this land, I'll remove you myself." Nathaniel's voice wasn't angry. It didn't need to be. There was power in a man who didn't need to raise his tone, who only had to stand his ground. Mark stared at him, then turned back to Claire. "You think he'll let you stay here forever?" Claire looked him in the eye. "No fear, just truth. Longer than you ever did." Mark swallowed hard, his eyes bloodshot. He stared at the house one last time, not with concern, but like a sore loser refusing to admit he'd lost. Then he turned, climbed into the SUV, and drove off, leaving behind the smell of rubber and the bitter cold of an unwanted presence. Claire collapsed onto the porch steps. Sweat beaded her brow. Her heart pounded like she'd just outrun a flood. That night, after the kids had fallen asleep, Nathaniel stepped outside and found Eli sitting alone, staring into the dark. After a while, Eli whispered, "Uncle Nathaniel, Mommy cries in her room sometimes. She thinks we're asleep. I don't want her to cry anymore. Please don't let her be scared again." Nathaniel sat down beside him. He said nothing at first. Then he pulled the boy into his arms. Ava, half asleep and clutching her pillow, wandered out too. He wrapped them both close. "I promise. No one will hurt your mom again, not ever." Claire stood at the door, frozen, hands trembling. She didn't step forward, didn't speak, but the tears came. Not from weakness, but because for the first time in her life, she saw what it looked like when someone else held her children safe in a moment she couldn't. The next morning, the sky turned a hard grey. The wind picked up. Dark clouds gathered low along the edge of the hills. No one said it aloud, but everyone felt it. A storm was coming. On the table, the file on Mark and Darlene lay open. Nathaniel flipped another page, the evidence clearer with each turn. Claire stood behind him, hand gripping the back of the chair, eyes locked. "It's time," she said. Nathaniel nodded. "Time to stop leaving everything behind a closed door." At dawn, the Grayson farm was quieter than usual, but not in peace. Everyone was up early. No one said much, but they all knew. Today wasn't an ordinary day. Maggie prepared breakfast for the children, cornbread and boiled eggs. Ava ate in small bites. Eli spun the wooden spoon in his hands, head down, but eyes locked on the door. Maggie placed a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to worry, sweetheart. Your mum and Uncle Nathaniel know what they're doing. They'll do what's right." Eli looked up, voice small but steady. "I want to go." Claire, standing just behind the doorway, heard every word. She walked over, knelt beside him. "There will be a lot of people. It might get loud. Some of them might say hurtful things." Eli met her eyes. Then he said something that stilled the room. "I don't need to speak, but if I sit beside you, they'll know you're not alone." No one said a word. Maggie stood up, grabbed scarves for both children, her voice soft, like a blessing. "Then today, we all go. No one gets left behind." Jefferson County Courthouse. The hearing room was modest, high ceilings, dark wood paneling, benches arranged in 2 quiet rows, still and solemn, like a chapel. Fluorescent lights cast a pale glow across the floor. Claire entered first, white button-down blouse, sleeves rolled, hair tied low, no makeup, no jewelry, just a small notebook in her hand, where she had written down every unseen wound. Eli and Ava sat in the second row with Maggie. Nathaniel walked beside Claire, expression unreadable, but eyes forward, ready for a battle without weapons. Mark sat across the aisle, black suit, red tie, clean-shaven, dressed like a polished businessman. But his eyes betrayed him, bitter, possessive. Darlene sat beside her son, black dress, snakeskin purse clutched in her lap. She looked at Claire the way one might look at a returned package. No surprise, no sympathy, just long-standing contempt. The judge entered. Judge Albright, a woman in her early 60s, silver hair, spine straight as steel. After 30 years on the bench, people called her the last door in family justice. She gave a single nod. No gavel needed. Preliminary custody hearing. Matthews v. Wallace. We'll begin. Claire's attorney stood, opened the file. Your Honor, we present the following. A medical report from Montana. General confirming injuries to Claire Matthews' shoulder and ribs, dated 2019. A denied medical assistance form containing a forged signature, proven to be from Darlene Wallace. Audio testimony from neighbors on July 14th, documenting the night Mark Wallace forced his wife and children out of the home, with clear evidence of emotional trauma inflicted on the minors. He pressed play. Get the hell out of my house. I'm done raising you and those kids. I know they're not even mine. Ava sobbing, Eli screaming, Mummy, don't go. Don't leave us. The courtroom stiffened. Darlene lowered her eyes. Mark shifted in his seat, but said nothing. Claire sat still, eyes fixed on the table. Then Mark's lawyer spoke. Your Honor, my client, Mr. Wallace, acknowledges past emotional outbursts, but firmly denies any physical harm. Ms. Matthews left of her own accord. There was no coercion. Claire was called to the stand. She walked up. No notes. Her voice low, but clear. I didn't leave out of anger. I left because I couldn't let my children learn silence as a response to violence. I used to bow my head. But my children don't deserve to grow up thinking that's normal. Mark stood, interrupting. I lost my job. I was under stress. I admit I wasn't perfect, but that doesn't make me a bad person. I just want to see my kids. Judge Albright turned to him, flipping a page. You were accused of assaulting a former girlfriend in 2016. Case dropped after private settlement. Correct? That was years ago. Old doesn't mean erased. She lifted her gaze, sweeping slowly across the room. I didn't sign anything. She forged it. Claire's lawyer handed over a document, a handwriting analysis from the state legal office. Final line, bolded. Signature is not a match. Forgery confirmed. Darlene Wallace's fingerprints found on the document. Judge Albright closed the file. Her hand rested gently on the bench. A silence hung, the kind that feels like time itself holding its breath. Eli reached for his mother's hand. Ava leaned over and whispered, Does the judge know Mommy's a good person? Eli replied, eyes never leaving the bench. She knows. Because today, Mommy didn't cry. The judge spoke. This court finds that Mark Wallace inflicted serious physical and psychological harm on his wife and children. All custodial rights, visitation privileges, and parental claims are hereby suspended indefinitely. Darlene Wallace's actions qualify for criminal investigation on the grounds of document forgery and benefits fraud. Full and permanent custody is awarded to Claire Matthews. Psychological support services are recommended for the children, Ava and Eli. The courtroom doors creaked open. A gust of cold air swept in. Mark lowered his head, jaw clenched. Darlene turned away, her shoulders rigid. No one looked at them again. Claire sat down, took her children's hands. She didn't cry, but her eyes glowed, like someone who had finally set down a weight they'd carried their whole life. Nathaniel stood behind her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. Maggie leaned down to Ava and whispered, Your mommy did it. Eli looked at his mother, then toward the doors, where light poured in from the hallway. Now Mummy doesn't have to run anymore, he said. We're standing now. On the drive back from court, the car was silent, but not heavy. Still, but no longer suffocating. Claire sat in the back seat, Ava curled up asleep in her lap. Eli stared out the window, occasionally drawing foggy circles on the glass with his fingertip. A smiley face. Crooked, uneven, just like the ones he used to draw on dark nights in the shed when his mother lay unconscious and he didn't dare fall asleep. This time, He added arms, 2 of them. Each arm reached outward and connected to another. 4 figures. Eli whispered, "I drew our family." Claire placed her hand gently on his hair. She didn't answer. She only smiled. Her first smile in a long time, not held back by tears. The farm came into view through the thinning pines just before 1 p.m. Montana air was dry and cold. Sunlight brushed the silver-grey rooftops like dusted snow. Maggie was the first to step out of the car, Ava's wool scarf in her arms. She paused, eyes sweeping the familiar land, as if taking in its scent. "We're home," she said softly. "Now. It really begins." Claire nodded. She didn't speak, but her eyes shimmered. In that moment, someone might have thought she was about to cry, but she wasn't. She was simply breathing, fully, freely, with lungs finally her own. Dinner was soft cornbread and warm chicken soup. Claire ate quietly, often looking at her children. Ava swung her feet under the table, giggling as Maggie told her a story about how Uncle Nathaniel used to skip school to carve wood. Eli didn't laugh. He sat at the end of the table, gripping a colored pencil. He drew circles on a napkin, uneven smiley faces, none of them quite the same. Claire walked over. Her hand gently touched the back of his neck, right where the faint, drop-shaped birthmark lay hidden beneath his hair. "You're drawing smiley faces again?" "Yeah," Eli replied quietly. "I want to make a lot, so you won't be sad anymore." Nathaniel stood at the sink. He heard every word. He turned away, pretending to grab another bowl, hiding the way his knuckles had gone white from holding the counter too tight. The next afternoon, sunlight spilled over the mountains like honey, golden, slow, and warm. No one said a word, but all 4 of them headed to the old shed. Maggie carried a small basket. Claire brought a wooden broom. The children each carried something important. Ava held her box of crayons, and Eli clutched a folded piece of paper close to his chest. The shed was still a shed, but the tin roof had been replaced, rotten wood repaired. Even so, the air inside still held something unnamed. Not mold, not dust, just memory. Claire stepped forward first, fingers brushing the doorframe like knocking gently on an old ghost. She inhaled deeply. The cold air no longer smelled musty, but it still carried the chill, the kind that remembers the night she nearly didn't wake up. Nathaniel stood beside her, in his hands a polished wooden plaque, smooth surface. The words hand-carved, sharp and deliberate. "No one gets left behind." He propped the plaque gently against the wall. The sound it made as it touched the floor, soft but ringing like a vow. Claire started sweeping broken beams. Each swipe of the broom seemed to brush not just wood, but her own past. Maggie opened old boxes, folding torn fabric, sorting through rusted tin containers from when Nathaniel was a boy. Ava sat cross-legged near the doorway, drawing a sun with thick yellow lines right beneath the threshold, humming a tune no one could quite place. Eli sat near the far wall. He unfolded his drawing, a smiley face, still imperfect, but underneath, a heart. Red, color bleeding outside the lines. He taped it to the wooden wall. No one told him to. No one asked, but everyone stopped to look. Nathaniel walked over to Claire. He glanced around the room, then spoke softly, his voice barely above the rustle of wind outside. "There's something I've wanted to tell you for a long time." Claire looked up. She was still kneeling, hands dusty from broken wood. Her eyes met his, and in that moment, they stood in the very room where both of them had once been lost, just in different years. Nathaniel pointed to the corner of the wall, where the late sun lit a narrow slit between the boards. "When I was 6, I stayed here before anyone took me in. I had no name. No one called for me. No one waited. I spent the first 3 nights sleeping in that corner, just staring through that crack in the wall. One afternoon, I saw a woman walk past the yard, holding hands with a little girl. The girl wore a flower dress, her hair was messy, no shoes, but her eyes, they were so bright. Claire froze. She let go of the broom, took a step back. I was here. My mum used to work odd jobs in this area. I wandered out back once. She scolded me for playing in the dirt. Nathaniel nodded slowly. I remember your eyes, the way you walked, half skipping, like the world didn't have cracks in it yet. He paused. The sunlight now touched the old boards behind them. When I saw you and your mother, I remember thinking, if someone could just hold my hand like that, maybe the night wouldn't feel so cold. Claire turned her face away, but her chest betrayed her, a quiet tremor. So we passed each other once, she said. So close. And didn't meet again. Until you collapsed in the exact place I once laid, and your son sat in the exact spot I once feared. Nathaniel stepped forward, but he didn't reach for her. He only said, "This time, I'm not the boy behind the wall." Claire turned back. She didn't smile, but her eyes softened, as if a fog had finally lifted from her chest. "And I'm not the girl who keeps getting lost." The wind slipped through the open door. Ava tugged on Claire's hand. "Mommy, look!" I drew our house. "See the sun?" Eli called softly from the back. "Uncle Nathaniel, can you hang my drawing high? I want people to see it when they come in." Nathaniel nodded. He hung Eli's picture next to the plaque. 2 images, side by side, a lopsided smile and a red, messy heart, next to a promise carved in wood. No one gets left behind. That night, after Ava had fallen asleep in Maggie's arms, Eli sat by the window with his crayons. This time, he didn't draw a face. He drew a house, small, with smoke curling from the chimney. 4 figures stood in front of the door, one tall, one with long hair, 2 little ones. Underneath, in clumsy but determined letters, he wrote, "Our home, no one left behind." Claire looked at the drawing. She didn't speak, only stared. Then she turned to Nathaniel and whispered, "Tomorrow, I want to paint the shed. I want it to stop being a place anyone fears." Nathaniel nodded, his voice soft, certain, like a vow sealed in daylight. "I'll bring the paint, and I'll keep the door open." There are some houses that don't need to be rebuilt. They just need enough light and warmth for people to find their way back. And that day, in a shed that once held broken stories, 4 people stood, with hands, with paint, with old scars, and a new heart. 1 week after the hearing, Montana changed seasons overnight. No more wind slipping through unsealed doors. No more frost blanketing the porch steps at dawn. Instead, soft, early winter sunlight slanted over dried cornfields and the last golden maple leaves that refused to fall. Claire opened the kitchen window and let the light pour in. The scent of cinnamon from Maggie's baking floated through the breeze. On the porch, Ava ran in circles, wearing a brand-new red scarf. Eli sat beside Nathaniel, sharpening pencils, while the man carved a wooden frame for one of his drawings. "He doesn't feel like a stranger anymore," Maggie said quietly, stirring the soup on the stove. "This air, I used to think this house would never feel like this again. Warm. Not because of the fireplace, because of the laughter." Claire didn't respond, but her eyes lingered on the scene. 2 children huddled close around Nathaniel, laughing at a crooked nail in the wood. And something inside her shifted, not loud, but real. The next morning, Nathaniel surprised everyone with a single line. "Let's go into town today, get a few things for the kids, And for their new room. Ava shrieked first. I want a dress with flower pockets, for my rocks. Eli didn't speak, but he nodded. Hard. Claire looked at Nathaniel. He didn't push, didn't ask for permission. He simply said, if we're living like a family, then we should do family things. It had been a long time since Claire walked through town without feeling like she had to run. They passed the grocery store, stopped by a dusty old bookshop. Ava chose a comic with cats. Eli chose crayons, orange for the first time, not just black and grey. At the children's clothing store, Claire hesitated. I don't even know what we need. Nathaniel smiled. Then pick what you've never let yourself buy before. By afternoon, they returned with a car full of things. New blankets, school notebooks, dinosaur dishes, wall paint, night lights, and 2 pairs of waterproof boots for the coming snow. Ava picked light pink wallpaper with bees. Eli picked navy blue with a world map. Claire sat on the floor, paint on her hands, hair a mess, but eyes glowing. It's been so long since I've seen them be the age they're supposed to be. That night, they ate Texas-style barbecue under the stars. Maggie made apple pie. Ava ate with one hand and told a story about a bumblebee who played soccer. Eli quietly sketched a drawing of Nathaniel titled The Man Who Keeps the Wind Out. Claire laughed, not because it was funny, but because she couldn't hold it back anymore. She looked at Nathaniel, a man who didn't speak much, who just cut Ava's food, refilled Eli's water, cleared the plates when everyone was full. No promises, no pressure, just presence. That night, as Claire tucked the kids into bed, Eli turned to her and asked, Can Uncle Nathaniel be Dad? Not like the old one, just a dad who stays. Claire squeezed his hand. She didn't answer, but later, when she walked downstairs and found Nathaniel fixing the door hinge, the warm light catching the quiet lines on his face, his weathered hands, his calm eyes looking back at her, not questioning, not demanding, just waiting. She knew. The answer didn't need to be spoken. Sometimes, morning light doesn't just pour through the windows. It slips into the quietest corners of the heart. Claire realized that one morning, in early June, the sunlight wasn't just on the porch. It filled the kitchen. Where Maggie was pouring tea, Ava was humming a song while kicking her feet, and Eli was standing on tiptoes, drawing on the family chalkboard. This time, no crooked smiley faces. He drew a house, small, with smoke rising from the chimney, 4 figures standing side by side, and beneath it, in shaky letters, our home. The house came alive, bit by bit. Every footstep, every spoon tapping against a breakfast bowl made it feel warmer, more real. Gone were the nights of silent breathing and trying to sleep through fear. Now, the dark was filled with whispers, laughter, Ava asking, Can we paint again tomorrow, Mum? Eli, writing slowly in the cloth-bound journal Claire had sewn for him. Claire didn't say much, but she knew. This shift hadn't come just from moving into the main house. It came from the fact that every heart inside that house had started to beat in sync. Even Maggie felt it. She often stood on the porch, gazing at the golden fields and muttering with a smile. This house used to have only wind in its walls. Now it's got little feet running, teaspoons stirring, and this old heart of mine waking up again. Nathaniel never said much either, but he was there more, fixing the porch roof, building a little desk for Claire's art supplies, lowering a bookshelf so Ava could reach, and showing Eli how to carve his name into a pencil box. He wasn't trying to be a father. He was just there, as naturally as sunrise. One late afternoon, sunlight filtered sideways through the mountains. Claire took the children back to the old shed. Not to clean it, not to repaint. That was done. This time Eli wanted to hang a new picture, the one Claire had once said was her favorite. A house, with warm yellow light pouring from its windows. Inside the shed, the afternoon glow touched every surface. No mold, no cold. What once was a place of collapse was now a quiet, warm room with a bookshelf, a few old toys, and a wooden sign still hanging high. No one gets left behind. On the twins' 4th birthday, the sky was startlingly clear. The air was soft, sunlight like golden honey, and the wind carried tiny flags strung along the fence like fluttering whispers. The whole town came. Some brought cake, some brought toys, some came just to see her. Claire, the woman who'd once been cast out into the night. Now, standing in a green dress, hair tied back, smile steady and whole. Maggie baked a 3-tiered cake. Nathaniel set up a long wooden table in the yard. On it, a small wooden sign read, "Today, we were born again." Ava ran everywhere, hugging every gift giver, racing back to show Eli each new treasure. Eli, as always, was quieter. He sat next to Nathaniel, eyes watchful. When Nathaniel leaned in and whispered, "You doing okay?" Eli looked up, thought for a second, and softly replied, "Dad." Nathaniel froze, not from surprise, but because in that moment the world itself paused. No one else noticed. People were clapping for the candles. But for him, that second melted away every old winter left in his chest. Ava heard it. She ran over, hugged his leg, shouting, "Daddy, we're 4 now!" Nathaniel looked up and saw Claire watching. Her eyes were no longer guarded, no longer uncertain, just clear and sure. She nodded. Once. The kind of nod that comes after years of wondering, seeing, and finally believing. This man is home. He scooped both children up, spinning them into the golden air. Ava laughed uncontrollably. Eli clung to his neck, still whispering, "Dad." Claire stood at the porch, eyes glistening. Not from pain, but from joy, from gratitude, from a long-awaited faith finally blooming after far too many dry seasons. When the party quieted down, Eli tugged Claire's hand toward the shed. He opened the door, the same door that once creaked open into a storm. Now it opened smooth. No wind, no fear. Inside, the wooden sign still hung, the words carved deep. No one gets left behind. Eli stood at the threshold, looked up at his mom, and whispered, "This is where the magic started." The sun dipped low. The whole family sat together on the porch steps. Behind them, the warm wooden house glowing. In front of them, the golden field blushing into soft red. Nathaniel sat in the center. Claire leaned into his shoulder. Ava curled into her mother's lap. Eli sat close, drawing one more smiley face. This time, not crooked, not shaky, still. No one said a word, but they all knew. There were no more doors to lock, no more walls to hide behind, no more children left begging not to be abandoned. They were here, and they would stay. Because sometimes, magic doesn't arrive with thunder. It slips in, through a glance, a hand, a name spoken gently, a door once shut, now left wide open. Thank you for staying with this story until the very end. If you're tired, if you've ever stood in front of a door and been too afraid to knock, please believe this. There is a place for you, a place where you can simply be, and someone patient enough to stay, wishing you peace today. And if there's no sunlight yet, may tomorrow be brighter. You deserve a little magic.